Hello, welcome to the show. My name is Frank Aziz, founder at MedFuel and investment banker, and the podcast explores healthcare, emerging science and technology trends, investing, and the real developments shaping the future of medicine and innovation. We look at what's actually happening on the ground, the science, the clinical progress, the capital, the risks, and the opportunities. Each episode takes a clear eyed look at a different topic. Today, we're focusing on the current state of neurotechnology. Neurotechnology is moving fast. Just this week, companies showed real time thought control of computers without penetrating the brain, while others advanced clinical implants and vision restoration devices. But one of the toughest remaining problems is still getting those implants into the brain cleanly and keeping them working longer. Actuated Medical, led by Dr. Maureen Mulvihill, is focused on exactly that challenge, using motion based tools to improve insertion precision and implant longevity. Today, we're joined by Dr. Mulvihill to talk about the practical engineering and clinical realities behind the progress we're seeing. Before I bring Dr. Mulvihill on, I just want to have a really quick disclaimer. I just want to say this. I'm speaking in my own personal capacity only. Nothing on this podcast constitutes investment advice, a recommendation, or an offer to buy or sell any securities. Views expressed are my own and do not represent those of any firm, client, or employer. Topics discussed may involve significant scientific, regulatory, clinical, and commercial risks. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult qualified professionals before making any investment or medical decisions. This content is for informational, and educational purposes only. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to bring Dr. Mulvihill on. There, there she is.
Hello.
How's it going?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. So, before we get into like the meat of general topics and all that's entailed in the industry, why don't you go into your background and kind of what you're currently doing?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dr. Maureen Mulvihill, and I'm President and CEO of Actuated Medical. I'm also a recognized leader in the medtech industry as I hold board of director seats on AVMed Excel, and Life Sciences Pennsylvania. But I lead a team that is transforming how we access the brain to improve outcomes. The company was started about 20 years ago. I was sitting in a doctor's office and we were talking about clinical needs. And he said, my patient has about 6 hours to get to that blood clot before it has uh, brain damage. And I went back and I said, okay, we need to develop medical devices. And so that's why actually it was founded on the idea of putting motion into medicine. So everything we do moves in such a way it enhances the procedure.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks, Dr. Mulvihill. I guess like my first question is just general question. What does it actually mean to understand the brain, like fully?
So the brain is like the last frontier, right? It's a an organ that's very hard to access. It it moves away. It moves. It has different layers, so it's really difficult to access. But it holds the key to many of the illnesses that people have. So we can treat neurological conditions if we hit the right target in the brain. So the brain is just fundamental to our health.
Wonderful. And do you feel like the brain is more of a computational system, a biological organism, or something that transcends both frameworks essentially?
Oh, it transcends both, right? So it's controlling how we're moving, how we're seeing, all of that. But it also is just an amazing piece of, we'll say, amazing piece of equipment that really needs to work properly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like the current like trends and like how do you feel about Neuralink, for example?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the neurospace right now, right?
Yeah.
So we have people that are using deep brain stimulation probes to access deep brain targets to control Parkinson's. So if they hit that target precisely, they
Yeah.
can stop the tremors, and so that Parkinson's patient can now eat soup again or button their shirt again where they didn't have that before. And then you have all of these other technologies that give somebody back their mobility or give somebody back their eyesight. So there's just so much going on in this space right now. And you do have companies like Neuralinks and BlackRock Neurotech and Paradromics that are also at the edge, really trying to give people their mobility back or giving them some sort of um, thing that they've lost,
Yeah.
bringing it back.
What would you say, like, in terms of us understanding the brain? What percentage do you think of the brain that we fully understand, or what do you feel like? Like, how far are we to the point where we understand fully the brain?
Oh, we're not even close, right? The brain is just this amazing organ, as I said before. But I mean, we've been studying it. So the brain initiative started like 20 years ago. And so they really are trying to figure out pinpoint the areas in the brain that control depression, that control Parkinson's, to control epilepsy. We're still trying to understand that. So if you think about epilepsy and they're doing epileptic mapping, so you have a patient, they're having seizures, they don't really know what's misfiring in the brain. So they put multiple different electrodes in there, maybe like 10 to 15, and they watch that patient over 4 or 5 days to see what's misfiring. And then if they find it, they can make a game changing improvement in that patient's quality of life. But it's all about understanding what's going on. So
What
we're putting
percent?
good.
What percentage of like complete knowledge do you feel like we have? What
Oh,
percentage?
I would say probably 10 or 15%. I think there's a lot more for us to learn, right?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
Um, that's wow. We still have a long way to go with
we
that
do.
stuff. And like, do you feel what's like a genuine like scientific explanation of consciousness in general? Like, what do you feel? Is there like a real definition of it, or do you feel it's still kind of one of those dubious concepts?
Yeah, I would think from my personal opinion on that, that we don't really know, right? Those are things that we're trying to figure out and understand. And maybe that's the other 90% of the brain that we haven't figured out yet. But it would be
Yeah,
interesting to control consciousness, right?
yeah, and yeah, like where does it come from? Like that's always been like a question, right?
Right.
Where does it really come from? Like, do we don't really have any scientific. Um, well, I mean, we have some scientific theories on that, right?
Right.
But
Well, I think there's almost scientific. There's people that, they believe in the body as the holistic part, right? So if we can understand what's going on, so you put all the pieces together and yeah, you control it, right? You understand it, but it's
yeah,
all related, right? So we just have to figure it out. We just
do you
don't know
feel like
yet.
do you feel it's possible that our consciousness is not attached to our body?
No, I don't personally believe that. Do you believe that?
Not necessarily, but for example, if there's a heaven, right? Your consciousness would go to heaven. It would separate from your body if in the afterlife. Um, so you know, I don't know. This goes into like really esoteric fields of
Right,
like
for sure.
soul and like
Right.
afterlife and things like that.
Now you're
Um,
beyond my education level because I never studied that. So I don't
and
know. I'm sure somebody
yeah,
else could get on the podcast next week and they might jump into that and go forward.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
But you do have a PhD
I do.
and that took you. You said you were just talking about it 5 years or 7 years with a master's degree.
Right.
Why don't we go into like more industry stuff? How has the convergence of neuroscience, engineering, and computing changed in the field in like the recent years?
Oh, it's significant changes, right? So we have AI, we have robotics, we have all these different understanding of the brain. Like I said, the Brain Initiatives have done incredible work in the last 20 years to pinpoint various targets. So pulling all of these different groups together, we have I always say it takes a village to get something done. And it really is. We're bringing the village together to treat neurological conditions. Because if you think about it, right, there's 100 million people out there that have some sort of treatment resistant neurological condition. So it's a huge group of people that need our help.
Absolutely. What do you feel like? What groups of people, niche groups of people, or subsectors are seeing the most momentum right
Well,
now?
we think about deep brain stimulation probes been treating Parkinson's for over 20 years, but now it's FDA approved for epilepsy, OCD, tremors. and it's being clinically investigated for treatment-resistant depression. So if you think about that, that's a lot of people where DBS can make a big change for them. And I
Yeah.
mean, from a personal standpoint, my father-in-law died of Parkinson's. So Parkinson's to me is something that's very, pulls at the heartstrings. I really want to make a difference. And for him, when my daughter was 2 years old, he'd put her in this little rubber bucket. He'd swing her around the living room, and the two of them would have a great old time. But just 2 years later, when my son was ready for the bucket ride, my father-in-law was not confident in his strength to lift his grandson around and fly him around. And that was just 2 years. That's how much it was degrading his mobility and whatnot. But we watched him decline for 10 years before he passed. And so
Mm.
us ensuring that DBS is out there and is more precise and can help more patients really, is pulls at my own heartstrings.
Yeah, I feel like people that become like severely depressed,
Mm,
they're just a different version of themselves usually, and I think we've all been depressed to some extent. And can you speak to like the the concept of um, most people thinking, or some people thinking, that you could just work yourself out of it, or you can just work out or eat differently, or whatever the case may be, and
right.
it will just become healed, or you'll be much better.
Right. Depression's not something that you can, it's a biologic, right? So, and they
Yeah.
know that now because it's being clinically evaluated for deep brain stimulation. So, if you could put an electrode into the brain and turn on a little current and stop that feeling of depression, that means it's a biological issue with the human. So it's
Hmm.
not something that they can just give them, some works, give them a drug, it'll work, right? Give them a little pill, might work. But there's a significant number of people that just doesn't work anymore. And by using a DBS probe, now this is still under clinical evaluation. There's been over 100 patients that have enrolled in that study. But one of the key people that I met at a conference about a year ago, he talked about thinking about committing suicide hundreds of times a day. And
Jeez.
once they gave him that DBS probe, turned it on, he woke up and they said, "Do you want to play with your kids and walk your dog?" And he said, "Yes." So it was game changing for him. And
Yeah.
he's now out there advocating for this technology for so many other people that have treatment resistant depression.
Did he like give you an explanation, or give anyone an explanation as to why he felt he was depressed? Like, most of us, if we're depressed, we're going to say, well, financially, I'm not doing so great, or, I just had a passing in the family, or whatever the case may be. Was there like a general explanation in his own mind why he was so depressed?
No, I
Or
don't think he knew why he was so depressed, but it
really?
was like I said, he was contemplating suicide hundreds of times a day, and now he's
Jeez.
enjoying life. So, and he did everything out there. They made him, before he could enter that study, he had to do all the pharmaceuticals, all the different procedures. Nothing worked.
Jeez. So like, wow. So how do you get to the point where you're like, well, I need to try something different, or being open? Is it just you're just so you have no hope, and you think, I'll
Right.
just try this other technology? Or how does somebody even come across DBS surgery?
Well, I think there's a lot on the internet now. I think you
Yeah.
Google. I mean, you can see a whole bunch of YouTube videos with him on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can Google DBS and you can see videos of people with Parkinson's talking about how they can button their shirt now, or they can eat soup again, right? But then you can also see people like this gentleman I was mentioning, where he talks about his depression. And
Wow.
that's why we do what we do, right? It's all about the patient. So neurotech is not simple. We're going into the brain. The brain is very complex. It has multiple layers. It's heterogeneous. But when you think about, wow, we can help these patients, let's make a difference. That's why we do what we do.
100%. 100%.
100%.
Yeah. So like, for me, like, if you initially see DBS surgery, how do you how do people get past the point of, does this really work? Would this really work for me? Because maybe they've like tried other medication, they've tried
Right. It
medications.
is treatment
Um,
resistant, right? They've tried a lot of things and nothing worked, right?
right.
And then the doctor
So
says, why don't you try this, right?
yeah. Hmm. And if nothing else worked, like why would I, you know, I'm just trying to think through the patient's eyes. Like, why would I think this would work, or why would I be excited about something like this to work? I mean, it obviously works, right?
Right.
We're not making any claims, but This so
Well, it
like
works for some people, right? You have to hit the right target and everything has to
yeah,
work, but yeah.
yeah. Um, what do you like? How do you feel like the entire industry is getting involved and kind of facilitating this technology? Do you feel like there is enough backing from industry, or do you feel there needs to be a lot more? Like, how do you feel about the current support it currently gets?
Well, I think it takes a village. I've already said that, right? So
Yeah,
you need the large companies pushing forward with AI and positioning and targeting and whatnot, and then you need those small companies like us doing the innovating because we're working a little bit faster. And then you need the investors, and you also need the scientists, right? So you need those neuroscientists trying to understand the body and say, okay, we need to target this place in the body, and then, like I said, you need to have the small companies doing the tools and the devices, and then the big companies really driving it.
yeah.
Then you have to have also the manufacturing. You need to understand that. You need to understand the regulatory piece. It is a village, right? We cannot do it alone. We need to work together.
I always say like it's so complex. Like the med device industry is extremely complex. There's so many players. It's much different than most other fields, and that's why everyone needs to support, or all industries needs to support. And it's
Right.
very difficult. Like it's such a challenging thing. Like, can you tell me about like what it was like starting the company and um,
Mm.
actuated medical, and you know what your like ups and downs have been?
Oh, ups and downs. There's probably a few of those, right? I always say it's like a roller coaster,
Yeah.
is a roller coaster a fun roller coaster today, or is it not a fun roller coaster today, right? I go back. It's to the patients. What we do is for the patients. So we've actually developed two other devices before our neuroglider system. So we have a device that clears feeding tubes while the tube remains in a patient. It is FDA cleared, has 5,000 uses. The first patient was actually at Walter Reed. So not only did we help a human being that day, we helped a soldier, somebody injured for this country, which was quite an emotional day for, because we're actually in rural Pennsylvania too. So it was really emotional. So then during COVID, there was a pediatric patient whose feeding tube been clogged for 8 days. And as a parent, you're like, what were you feeding that child?
Yeah.
But anyway, we overnighted the system to them. We trained the doctor. I talked to him and I'm like, just giving him a lot of advice. And about 2 hours later, he emailed and he said, we cleared the tube. You saved the child from surgery. So when you have the down days, those are the up days, right? So that's why we do it. But I think along the way, as Actuated has really gone from a concept development company to we actually manufacture our own devices here in central Pennsylvania. So we do everything concept all the way to manufacturing and then a little bit of sales on the end. So I would say the biggest issue is probably cash flow, right? I think every small company, I have an incredible team here. I want to make sure my team is has family sustaining incomes, right? We want to make sure everybody's covered. And then
Mhm.
we want to grow and we want to help patients. So we've done a lot with what we call non dilutive capital. And so the United States government has a program called the Small Business Innovation Research Program, and
Right.
we've done a lot of those grants. So we've done a lot that have funded the medical devices that we've developed along the way. So the first one, Tube Clear, was funded with National Institute of Health and National Science Foundation funding. And then our other device slides onto the end of an endoscope, and it will say it has like two little fingers that helps them manipulate tissue during complex colonoscopy. So these are patients that have cancerous polyps in their GI tract, and they want to remove those in one piece so you don't worry about the cancer reseeding.
Mhm.
Once again, that technology was funded with that Small Business Innovation Research grants from NIH. So those types of programs. So I think your issue really is funding, right? So bringing in the funding so that we can really commercialize and help patients.
Yeah, yeah. So from like an investment perspective, um, to investors, like how do investors assess the overall investment attractiveness of neurotech compared to like other life science areas?
Yeah, I would think that they would assess it in a couple different ways, right? Does the technology have patents that surround it? Does the technology have key opinion leaders or clinicians, or in this case, neurosurgeons that support it and say, yes, this is a problem? Is there some sort of regulatory pathway that's clear? Is it a 510(k) pathway? Is it a PMA pathway? Is it a breakthrough device? And then that reimbursement, that's always key because when you get to the hospital, somebody's got to pay for it. So do you think insurance companies are going to pay for it? Do you think CMS is going to pay for it?
Hmm.
Those are the types of things that investors need to be looking at. And then, of course, the team, right? Can the team deliver? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you give me like a great example of academia, startups, industry coming together
Uh,
and driving progress?
yeah.
Maybe
I
in your
would say you're
company in
Yeah,
general.
yeah, I would say your example's actuated, right? So,
Yeah.
actuated, we think of an idea, we talk to clinicians, we do our research, we write the grant gets funded. Our subawardee is usually an academic institution. So we have great partnerships at University of Pittsburgh, at CMU, at Oregon Health, lots of places, right? So those academics are doing the science to understand what's going on in the brain, but they're also helping us do the preclinical work because as a small company, we don't have the preclinical labs here. So we have to partner with places like Penn State or University of Pittsburgh to do that, support us that way. So let's say the academics are doing the science and they're doing the preclinical studies that we need to have done or even the clinical studies that need done. And then on the for actuated itself, as I said, we do the development and we do the intellectual property development. But at the end of the day, we're looking to find a strategic partner to do the high end commercialization of these technologies.
Yeah, 100%. And like so just so for the listeners and the people watching, in terms of the technology itself, actuated medical, what specifically does the technology do? I know it's an insertion device, but do you want to explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, so when you insert devices into the brain, so you have AI systems and you have robotic systems, and they do the targeting, they do the planning. But as
Yeah.
you insert the DBS probe or the whatever type of implant you're putting in, as soon as you start going in through the tissue, you have a tissue interaction with that. And so sometimes that device deflects as it goes from one layer of brain tissue to the next layer, but our technology uses electronically controlled motion. So we're going down through the tissue more precisely. And as we go through each layer, we're not deflecting like they did if they just manually inserted it. And so our technology improves the insertion, improves the trajectory. So we hit the target, but we also maintain the channel on the way in. So we don't have any out of plane wobbling. So there's no
Right.
chance of like fluids coming back up if you were doing a gene therapy infusion or an addiction treatment therapy or something like that. So we're just increasing the precision of these devices hitting the target.
What's the implication if the target is missed?
Well, so right now we understand various parts in the brain that control depression, Parkinson's, and whatnot. So there's a specific region of the brain they're trying to hit. If they miss that region, then the patient's not going to have any relief from those symptoms. Or if they miss it by a lot, there could be some off target effects. So if you're putting a DBS probe in and you're supposed to hit a target about the size of a small olive deep in the brain. So, say you're close to the target, but you're a little bit off. So, you might stop the Parkinson shakes, but you could have some problem with speech. So, you have
Hmm.
that off target placement. So, if you hit it on right where you're supposed to hit it, the Parkinson symptoms are gone and the patient just has an incredibly better quality of life. If you miss it slightly, okay, they have a good quality of life, but they might have some off target effect. And if you miss it totally, well, there's not going to be any change in their quality of life. So we want to hit the target the first time. And even with DBS surgeries, there's been papers out there that say the 3 to 8% miss rate. So think about that. It's 1 in 20 patients has to have a second brain surgery because they missed it by too much. And that's
Jeez.
what we fix.
Yeah. Um, so, te- what is that? What is that experience like? So when the target's missed, they have to go in for a second brain surgery. I mean, it's obviously very unpleasant for the patient.
Very much so. And the family members, and the physicians, and the hospital that has to cover that second surgery, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
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 it
so the
impacts
hospital
everybody.
obviously. So the hospital has to cover the surgery the second time,
Right.
so out of pocket, essentially.
Correct.
Um, wow. And
Correct.
so have you talked to a lot of patients that have had to go like into a second surgery, or like what has been your experience with that?
It's not a funny story, but a funny story, Frank. So I was at another conference and I was actually at the happy hours right after the conference is over. You're in the happy hours, and I was talking to a friend I've known for I don't know 15, 20 years, and I said, "Hey, we're our neurogliders improving insertion of deep brain targets, and DBS is one of our first indications we're looking at." And he goes, "Oh, my wife." They missed. She had to have a second brain surgery with her DBS probe. So um, yeah, it happens, Frank. But yeah, so his wife actually, I interviewed her after that to learn more about her experience. So yeah, it was just a
Sweet.
casual conversation, and up there's somebody.
Wow. Wow. That must be nerve wracking, obviously.
Oh,
uh,
yeah. Who wants to go? Nobody wants to have their brain open twice. I mean, when the procedure works, it's game changing, and it's well worth having the procedure. But in that one of 20, we have to do it again. That's not so fun.
I can't imagine like you've experienced this, deep depression for however many years, and for the first time, there was one patient I did talk to. I think I was introduced through one of your patients, one of the patients that you've worked with in the past, and she thought that was it was normal to be that depressed consistently, and then when she got the deep brain stimulation, what she said was it was like night and day, and she just, oh wow, this is what normal people experienced. Like, you know, um, that's what she was
Yes.
kind of saying. Like, this is what normal people experience, and it was so unfamiliar to her, and I thought it was really interesting that.
Now remember though, I'm gonna make this clear, like, this is one of those disclaimers. It's still under clinical evaluation for
Still under
depression,
clinical
right?
evaluation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it is FDA approved for Parkinson's, epilepsy, OCD, and tremors. But yeah, but I mean, yeah, the people I've talked to, yeah, game changing for them, especially
Yeah.
when you're so depressed that you can't get out of bed or something, right? And now you can
Yes.
get out of bed and you want to go run around. So it is game changing. But
I
yeah,
wonder how many
it's
people are living depression but just think it's normal for everyone, like in deep, deep depression.
there's a significant number. It's a huge number of how many people have clinical treatment resistant depression. And I
Yeah.
think probably a lot of people on this cast are saying, "Yeah, I know somebody or I have somebody in my family that it has depression issues." It's a huge number. And the other one that's really large is obsessive compulsive disorder, which is FDA approved for DBS treatment.
Yeah.
There's a significant number of people that have treatment resistant OCD.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about interesting topics, some kind of controversial a little bit, but um do you feel like what how do you feel like AI will be integrated with neurotech, and
Oh,
do you feel like there's going to be a reduction in physicians or replacement? I don't think it's ever going to happen. It seems silly, but like, what are your thoughts on it? Because I know, Elon Musk was talking about how surgeons will be replaced in 3 years or something like that.
uh,
And I thought it was a little silly, but
I don't think so.
yeah,
I don't think so. I think AI is here. AI is here to help the trajectory, the planning.
yeah,
It's here to help analyze the data because, like, say if you're doing the epilepsy mapping and you have 12 different probes and they're recording data for 4 or 5 days, that's a lot of data for humans to sift through where AI can get through that. So it's there for the data piece, it's there for the planning, but you
yeah,
still need the surgeon to look through it, make sure everything is okay, and actually do the procedure. So I don't think our surgeons are still okay. We're fine. I
yeah,
don't believe that. I guess is what I'm saying. Um,
yeah, yeah,
but AI is part of the planning, and AI is part of the data analysis.
yeah. You don't think Optimus is going to take over all the surgeon jobs, or?
No, I haven't seen Terminator lately. I don't think we're okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's so much that like it's just. I mean, I think certainly AI is going to definitely change the kind of landscape of our system,
Mhm.
but it's not gonna. it's not going to do what I think a lot of doomers are explaining, like replacing doctors, replacing the healthcare system, which I think a lot of doomers are expressing. Which
Is that what
it
they're
just there's
called? Doomers? I never heard that
yeah, they're called doomers,
doomers.
like the AI doomers, where that like like their philosophy is that AI is going to take over and potentially destroy humanity. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that is Skylab, isn't it? We're watching Terminator here. Now,
Yeah,
I think at the end of the day, when you have a problem like this, you want to talk to a human. You want to talk to a
yeah,
doctor.
yeah.
Um, Talking to an I just don't see that happening. I don't see us going to the doctor's office and having the AI talk to me, right? I'd rather have the
Yeah.
human talk to me. So I
But
think we're okay.
there's
I'm
also
not a
so many.
doomer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm an
There's also
optimist. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. There's so many things that could go wrong I mean, I'm not an expert in neurosurgery, but like there's so many things that could go wrong in the moment that I don't think AI could solve in the moment. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think it's just yeah, it's just silly talk to be honest. Uh,
I,
maybe like in 50 years from now, maybe I think surgeons will
I
still be working,
Yeah,
but
I think people still wanna talk to a human, right? I don't
yeah.
think I'm gonna go to the doctor and wanna talk to some AI thing at me, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends. It depends how much you love humans, right?
Maybe, alright, yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe give me that. I don't know, but okay. So what are like the biggest challenges that we have to figure out as a society, or just as or for you as a company, that you think will help progress neurotech in general?
What are the biggest things well, I think it's the brain, right? Alright, so you're talking about this brain, you have this organ, you have it, it's fluid, it moves, it has multiple layers, so it's heterogeneous, and so when you put something in the brain, like these probes, the brain's like, "That's not supposed to be here. I'm
Yeah.
gonna push this out." It's called the foreign body response, and the simple
Right.
way to think about it is you get a splinter in your finger, and your finger keeps trying to push out the splinter. Well, you put something in the brain, and the brain's trying to push that out too. So there's a lot of people looking at designing the implants to be more flexible so they match the mechanical property of the brain or they um, are putting coatings on it. We have a technology that we're in developing that minimize that foreign body response using gentle acoustic waves. So I think that's one of the key things is if you're going to put an implant in somebody who's 70 years old, maybe they have 10 or 15 years. So you got 10 or 50 years. But if you're going to put an implant in somebody who has depression or OCD and they're in their 20s, you want that implant to last 50 years. And so minimizing that foreign body response and that interaction, because what happens is like the scar tissue. So what's happening with foreign body response is you have the little cells and they're trying to encapsulate whatever you put in there. And so if you encapsulate, it's not going to work anymore. So the idea here is if you can minimize the response or that scar tissue, then the electrodes will work longer and they'll last longer. And so as we're thinking about, okay, how are we going to put implants in a 22-year-old so that they have that same implant till they're 50? We really need to think about that foreign body response and minimize it.
How long do they last currently, like on average, would you say?
Well, I think that's kind of up in the air. That person I mentioned about had to have the second DBS probe, she's had it
uh,
for over 17 years, which is phenomenal.
wow.
I think they've been doing DBS probes for about 25 years. So I don't know if we know the exact number of how long it's going to last. But
Wow.
some of the probes, then when they start not working right, they start turning up the power on them so that then, so you're turning the current up so that they keep working. And that's probably the foreign body response of those cells surrounding the implants. And so they're just turning the voltage up a little bit to keep them working.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is I don't know, but if I was 25, I'd want it to last for at least 50 years, right? I don't
Yeah.
know how long's a hip implant last, right? You want
Jeez,
it
I
to
don't know.
last a
Maybe
long time.
20 years, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's get our probes in there and let them last for 20, 25 years, just like a hip implant.
Do you think we'll get to the point where it's indefinite? You know. Where?
That would be phenomenal, right? You wouldn't have to do it twice, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can we get there? It takes science, right? So we have a lot of great scientists out there working on understanding the brain better and working on the biology and all the different things going on. Can we figure this out? Maybe. The technology we're developing. Can we, get more funding to move that one forward so that we can show that, yeah, by using our technology periodically, you minimize that foreign body response, and so those electrodes last longer. I
yeah,
don't know. It's a
for
good
sure.
question.
We were talking about science, and not to get political, but the current cut in funding for scientific endeavors, like how has that affected, kind of in general, scientific progress? Um,
It's affected a lot of things. The changes in the last what last 16 months, maybe something like that, right? There's been a lot of researchers that have left this country. There's been a lot of research that stopped in the middle of it being done.
Jeez.
There's a lot of people that have grants that have great scores that aren't getting awarded right now.
Yeah,
We are leaders in healthcare innovation in this country, and that leadership is now a concern, right? So we were leaders in pharmaceutical research, we were leaders in medtech. I mean, how many studies that were looking at cancer have been halted or slowed down? So the effect of that later in life, 10 years from now, we're behind where we were. And if you think about
yeah,
it, right? So 20 years ago, they put a lot of emphasis into understanding the brain, and that's where that brain initiative was. And so, okay, so 20 years later, we now know the target site for depression. We know the target site for all of a lot of these different longevity conditions like Alzheimer's and things like that. We know a lot more than we did 20 years ago. And so now we can help more and more patients. And then if you flip that around and you say the healthier the the population, the better it is for the country's growth. So it is directly affects GDP. So if we want the country to grow, you want
yeah.
your population to be healthy. And
Well,
so the money that we invest in science to make our people healthier only improves our economy too.
yeah, I think it was like healthcare was like 17 trillion of our economy in GDP or something like that. Healthcare,
Right.
and yeah, there are strong implications like later on. Like how much further along were we compared to other countries? Would you say were we much
Well, we
farther
were the
along? Or
leaders. We were the leaders
yeah,
in brain computer interface research. We were the leaders in cancer research. We were the leaders across many different research areas.
yeah, like
And
so we were the like number one spot. Like what was who was number two? Was it China or was it?
oh, I don't know. I don't that's above my pay grade maybe. I don't know who number 2 was.
Yeah, but it was very clear to you that we were
It was
number
very
one.
clear we were
Yeah,
leaders in innovation and we are leaders in healthcare development and and innovation.
wow. So
Right.
like you feel like a lot of scientists are leaving the US for other countries? Do you think they'll come back?
I, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I hope they come back. We have some brilliant people. And then we have a lot of people that were here doing research that had to leave, so we've lost some really credible researchers that were actually moving our science further or farther.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like every time I talk to somebody in academia, they're always talking about layoffs and, you know, the economic downturn in the industry. Um,
Right.
it's really quite sad.
But,
Um,
like I said, like think about how many clinical studies were stopped in the last 12 months. You can't really start one back up, right? So all
yeah,
that money that was invested to get to that clinical study is just kind of like thrown away, right? So we
yeah.
lost a lot by not finishing a lot of these studies and things like that. And a lot of these researchers, like I
What,
said,
what percentage of studies do you feel like haven't been finished just because they've been stopped? Is it like a very high percentage, or do you feel,
I
um,
feel like it's a moderate number of studies that didn't got. I don't know that number, but
yeah,
there's you hear it, right? You hear it from the academic community, you hear it from clinicians, you hear it from a lot of people that hey, my study got stopped or that study I was involved. And think about the patient. So you're in the middle of a study, and then they
Yeah.
stop the study. What happens to that patient? Right. So actually, before all of this happened, we were interviewing people in the neurospace, and we interviewed a couple people. There was a company who was doing a brain implant for eye restoration, and
Mm.
so people had that implant, and the company went um, bankrupt, right? So what happens to all the implants that were in that patient, right, or in those patients, right? So there's like the company's bankrupt, right? So
Geez. So
um,
what does the patient do?
that's a good question. I don't really know,
Huh.
right? So hopefully somebody did something, right? But you
So,
have a lot of like, so you're in the middle of a
so,
cancer therapy and they stop the study, like, oh,
so,
and
so so let's walk through this. So let's say you get like let's say you do an experimental therapy because you have, let's say, stage 4 cancer, and you get some type of implant that only one particular company can do. And then you cut the funding of that company and they go bankrupt. What what kind of monstrosity is that?
yes, that's a question a lot of people have been asking. And it happened before this too, right? So we ran out of money, the investors didn't invest, all that kind of stuff. It happens, right? But
Jeez,
yeah,
jeez.
it's not good, especially if stage 4 cancer, right? You need it to work. I mean, one of the things we're looking at too is glioblastoma, right? If somebody gets a brain
Yeah,
cancer, it's the quality of their life expectancy is not good. Can we deliver a therapeutic directly to that brain tumor and have that go away rather than giving them systemic dosage that goes through the entire body? Can we deliver it to that brain cancer tumor
man,
directly and make a difference in that patient's outcomes?
wow. That's insane. I
Right.
don't know. That's
Yeah.
man, it's so like depressing to think about, to be
But
honest.
even that, if
Like,
you think about that one, right? So you have the company developing the therapeutic that has to be delivered, and then you
right.
have a company like mine developing the access tool. So it takes a village, right? It's a whole bunch of people helping that one patient.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I mean, think about how many like kids have, neurological disabilities, or
Right. We were
cancer, or
just
whatever the case
talking
may be.
to a pediatric neurosurgeon up in Boston, and he was delivering a gene therapy to 20, well, I guess it was 10 very sick babies. And his delivery axis, he was off target in five of those 20, each patient had two, right? So he was off target by about five of those patients, slightly off target, right? And so think about that, the baby's brain's not that big. So
Right.
by having a technology like ours that improves the precision, it'll be better for kids too. So it's not just adults and people with Parkinson's and depression. We're talking about kids that are really sick that need these gene therapies to um, have thriving lives, to thrive.
I think it's like easy for people to um, have like almost like a cognitive separation of like where somebody is versus somebody that's sick, and what like somebody that's sick experiences on a consistent daily basis. Um, like what's that quote? If you could have 1,000 problems, but later in life when you get sick, you have one problem.
Oh, I never heard it. That's an interesting quote, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's an
So,
interesting quote. Yeah,
yeah. So if you have 1,000 problems,
yeah,
um, but your health is not optimal, you have one problem. You don't
that's
have a
right.
thousand problems.
That's right.
And so I
Yeah.
wonder what it's I like. I don't want to put myself in anyone's shoes, but like, I wonder what it's like for somebody just to have that one problem that they're thinking about all day long, and like it's so yeah.
Well, that goes back to your depression, right? When you have treatment resistant depression, your whole life is being depressed, right? You can't work, you can't go and hang out with friends, you can't go to the movies, right? You can't go to work, all those different things. And so the patients that we know, right, as I said, this is still clinically being evaluated, but the patients
Yeah.
that we've met that have had DBS probes for their clinically depressed depression, have game-changing improvements in their quality of life. They're working again, they're playing with their kids
Yeah.
again, they're going to conferences and are on stage talking about how important this technology is.
Right. And that, just educational for educational purposes, we're just sharing that, but yeah, there's no guarantee that like that would happen. Um,
Right. And
and
there's, I mean, none of these. I mean, you're talking about putting something in the brain. It's
yeah,
very, anyway, it's things could go wrong, but when they go right, they're incredibly better for quality of lives.
yeah, it's just all a risk benefit, risk
Yeah.
benefit analysis. And like when you have no hope and doctors are telling you that you have, 6 months to live,
Right.
you know, the benefit risk changes. The
Right. You're
benefit
willing to
risk,
do anything to live, right? You're willing to,
yeah,
and that goes for cancer treatments, right? So when they tell you you're at stage 4, but there's this one treatment you can do, you do it.
yeah. So like, can you tell me a little bit more about the regulatory pathway to get this kind of your technology, you know,
Yeah.
or technologies in the sector approved?
Yeah, so it really depends on the technology and what it's doing. So in our case, our technology is like an actuated cannula. So we are an access device. And so we'll be using the FDA 510K pathway. We've already interacted with the FDA once in what they call a pre submission meeting. And we have
Yeah,
another pre sub going back in shortly to FDA just to confirm our plan on what we're doing, the V&V test, the verification validation testing we need to do for that 510K. Now, for technologies like DBS probes, they have to go through what they call the PMA process. And so they need clinical data to show
yeah,
that it makes an improvement so they can have those claims in their indication for those technologies. So it really depends on what you're doing. So ours is an access device and our predicate will be another access device. But in the case of like a DBS probe, originally they had to start with like the PMA process. And then there's innovation in the middle, doesn't fit in the 510K process, it doesn't fit in the PMA process. It fits in what they call the de novo process. And the de novo is you might need clinical data, you might not need clinical data, but you don't have something to compare your technology to show substantial equivalence.
yeah, absolutely. So like, if there's like a huge macroeconomic factors in healthcare policy that affect, you know, do those factors, macroeconomic factors and healthcare policies, do they affect adoption, and
Oh,
do they like like how much do they affect it, and how much have we been slowed down in recent years?
yeah. So, yeah, policy does matter. And so think about it. So you have FDA. And
Yeah,
so any changes at FDA are going to affect getting products FDA cleared or approved or whatever the regulatory pathway is. But then you get to somebody has to pay for it. So is it CMS? Is it insurance companies? And CMS really controls that payment stream because everyone kind of starts at CMS for the most part. And so changes in policy with CMS affect the payment into the hospital system. And so, with pretty much every administration in the last 3 or 4, they keep trying to change the policy, and it takes a long time to change the policy. So, by the time the administration's out, we get close to having a new policy that's firm for CMS, and then it gets changed again. So, I would tell you that
nerve-wracking.
reimbursement
Yeah,
for medical devices and other technologies is needs to be done. Better so that products get paid for. Because if you look at the health economics of these devices, they actually do save money at the long run. So it looks like, oh, I'm spending a lot, but in the end, you're saving that money. So to go to CMS and ask for reimbursement, you have to have the regulatory piece, but you also have to have the economic model. And a lot of
yeah,
those economic models require clinical data.
yeah.
So it's a process.
I mean, $17 trillion in GDP for our economy. If we can prevent more people from going to the hospital or we do surgeries,
Mm,
obviously we're going to save money there long term. So there's
right.
like a huge return on investment for the society in general to invest in these technologies. Um,
Correct.
yeah, and
How do you think
Yeah, like
about med tech? Med tech's interesting too because you have pharma, everybody knows pharma, and you have
yeah,
med tech, and people don't really know med tech, right? You don't think medical devices. But, you go into a hospital room and you sit there, and everything in that room is a medical device some way, right? From the bandage to the bed to the ventilator to the blood pressure cuff and everything they're using. So med tech is one of those things where innovation improves patient outcomes. And so, as you said about GDP, improving quality of life makes things better. Or think about it, if your kids are healthy, then you can go to work. If your kids aren't healthy,
yeah,
then you're going to miss work. So,
yeah.
those are things where we need to really think about is preventative, making sure people are healthy from the beginning rather than waiting for them to get
Well,
critically ill.
I'd like the GDP to go down because that means we're treating less patients because we don't need to treat as many patients.
Well,
Uh,
GDP is like the GDP part is the economics of the country, right? So if
yeah,
everybody's healthy, then they're working, they're paying taxes, and the company's growing. The country is
yeah,
growing.
yeah, yeah.
So, but if everyone's sick, then they're too sick, they're not going to work, they're not paying taxes, and the economy's not growing.
Right,
So
right, right.
that's the
But what I'm
implication
saying
there.
is like, so like if the GDP of healthcare goes up, right? Does that mean that more people are getting sick and that people are doing less work? Is, is there a correlation there, or do you
Well, the
feel
yeah, the correlation is that healthy people are
yeah,
adding to the country's GDP,
right? Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So when sick people, unhealthy people just aren't going to work or they can't go to work or they're not paying, they're just not generating tax revenue, which grows the country.
yeah. But if like
So we want,
payers are paying more for procedures, isn't that an indication that people are more sick, or is it so convoluted that we don't even know? Like, there's so much waste in kind of that.
no, I don't think there's, I
Yeah,
don't, I don't believe there's that much waste. I'm sorry.
you don't you don't think so? Okay.
I don't think so. I don't
Yeah,
think so. There is some waste, but I don't think so. Um,
yeah,
right. So I think healthcare costs the country a lot, right? So
okay.
you have a lot of people that are getting older, and so they go to the doctors, they get on medication, things like that. But
Yeah,
if you keep them healthy early on, and then if they get older, they're still healthy, right? So if we keep people healthy, then they're not going to be needing all that.
yeah. Yeah, and what about like people that what, talk about like the social determinants of health, like people that um are of a lower economic status, or maybe they just don't have access, maybe they're in rural areas, and they just don't have the same access. Like,
Right.
what are your thoughts on that, like on people not being able to get the health care they need?
Well, I think that's a problem, right?
Yeah,
Because if you can't get the health care, do the preventative, right? If you can't do the
yeah,
preventative health care, then when you finally go see a doctor, you're really sick. So then it's costing a lot. Or instead of you don't have a primary care physician, you have to go to the ER. So now instead of it being a $25 copay or something, it's now a $250 copay or a $200
yeah.
copay. Not to mention, you walk in the ER and we're talking $1,000 or whatever it is when you walk into the ER.
What I
Um,
feel like, oh, sorry, go.
but I was saying, like, I'm in rural Pennsylvania here, and so there's like near where I am, there's several hospitals, but for people that are about 2 hours north of me, they have to come all the way down here to
Yeah,
get a doctor, right? So here's a woman in labor 2 hours from here, and she's in the car, and they're driving her down here to get to an OB. That's not a good thing, right?
right.
So, but the answer to that is I don't know. I mean, do we need more doctors, right? We need more clinics. We need better healthcare so people have insurance so that they can go at the preventative time, right? They'll go before they get sick. And so,
Right.
preventive healthcare saves money.
Yeah, 100%. Um, but yeah, just our healthcare system's so messed up with like PBMs, and like when you talk about copays, right? Like sometimes when you go to the pharmacy, your copay's more expensive than the actual medication. How does that make sense?
I don't know. I have to get EpiPens all the time. So, yeah, for my kids. So,
Yeah, and then
yeah,
like the PBMs have these weird contracts with pharmacies that you can't share the actual prices of medications
yeah,
or medical devices or anything like that. Um, that's really sad that our society is so focused on money that people can't get the proper health care, especially for people that don't have the means to really cover the costs, or they don't have the proper health insurance all the time, or maybe like even worse, the people that can't qualify for Medi-Cal, but they can't afford any health care.
right, right, right. I think, well,
What do
you're in
people,
California. So, isn't everybody covered in California?
thankfully, I think so, but there are people I think that still fall through the cracks.
Yeah. See,
Um,
here, that's not the case. So, there's people we know that have gone bankrupt because they couldn't pay their health care bill.
I'm not even sure. Like I'm not even sure. Like what are the factors that get someone approved for Medi-Cal, right? What are the income requirements, net worth requirements, whatever the case. I don't know that, but perhaps like there's an income requirement that you have to have. Like you have to be below a certain level. But if you're above that level, but you're still poor, like what is that? How do you survive that?
I
Like
don't
let's say
know.
somebody like has the deep depression, or maybe they need to take insulin, or they need GLP-1s, or whatever the case may be, and they can't get Medi-Cal. That's so sad in our country that people are going bankrupt for this type
Yeah.
of stuff. But yeah, especially people living in depression on a consistent basis. Like, if we got like everyone out of depression, how much would that improve society? Like, how much more
Oh, it'd be
productive would people be?
significant. It would
Yeah,
be
how much
significant.
how
I
much
mean, we're
more productive
talking,
would you be?
I think it's 10 million people or something that have treatment resistant depression.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how much more
It's,
productive would we be? How much more collaborative would we be?
let me
How much
tell you.
happier would we be? Yeah.
So, treatment resistant depression. Worldwide, there's 280 million people that have treatment resistant depression.
Jeez.
I don't know what the US number is, but that's worldwide.
Jeez. So are people
Remember, I
getting?
said OCD was high, right? OCD
Yeah.
worldwide is 140 million.
So are people still getting treated though? Like, if you have treatment resistant depression, and are they still getting treated, and it's not working, and they're still doing it, or
Yeah,
is it?
probably. I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, they're trying something, right? I think it's the same thing
Wow.
if you think about addiction, right? So you have somebody who is addicted to something and they just keep getting the cravings. And they're looking at this right now of using technologies like DBS to, or actually more like the therapy. So with Neuroglider, we're looking at not only improving DBS accuracy, but improving injection to deep brain targets. So, if you can inject a biologic to a deep brain target that minimizes the craving of somebody that has an addiction, then the pharmaceutical that they would normally give that patient would work because you've damped down that craving. And so, there's just so many things with the brain that if we can control the brain, we can improve the person's quality of life. And I mean, I think we probably all know somebody who has some sort of addiction, right? And being
Yeah.
able to, and a lot of times they get to the point where they just ruin their life, they ruin their family's lives because they just can't control it. So if we could damp down that craving by delivering a biologic to that brain target precisely, it could be incredible for the people with addiction too.
I feel like in a sense, gambling is very similar
I'm
to.
sure there is something in the brain that when you're gambling, you get excited, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so if you could damp down that exciting part that happens with
Yeah.
the gambling, then you wouldn't gamble anymore. But there's a
I was listening
enthusiasm
to
there.
to a podcast once, and I think it was like maybe, so if you depends on what time frame you look at, but for people that gamble, like maybe 3% actually are in the positive overall. Oh, because like what happens is, and I experienced a little bit with FIFA because I was on this app called Kalshi. um, but like the problem is you win initially, and then you keep thinking you're gonna win. And then even if you have, there's this weird like thought process that goes that's in place when you're doing it. It's like you think, oh, I'm gonna stop at this point, but then you completely forget about your game plan. You're just like, I can keep winning.
Right.
And I think that's what happens with addiction too. Like a lot of people that are addicted, um, like on whatever drug, they're
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I'll just stop tomorrow. It's not a big deal. Like I'll get off this whatever. I'll stop doing it tomorrow. And I think people just trick themselves into doing that. But if again you can tamper um, that that response, I think that would help a lot tremendously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So to conclude the podcast, do you have anything to add? Um, any other things that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah. I would just say that neurotechnology is, before we thought it was science, now we're moving to the clinic. We have the opportunity now to make game-changing improvements in people's lives. We have 100 million people or more that have some sort of treatment-resistant neurological condition, and the goal is to make their lives better. And that's why we do what we do. It's all about the patient.
Amazing. Thanks, Dr. Mulvihill. We appreciate you, and we'll talk again very soon.
All right. Thank